Hey everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the 6 highest earning career paths after university. So we'll be focusing specifically on graduate roles, but in a future video, I'll talk about roles that don't necessarily require a degree. In this video, we'll discuss the pros and cons of each of these roles, and hopefully that will help you understand what you could look forward to after university. At 6, we have a trainee corporate solicitor on anything from £22,000 a year to £58,000 per year. It varies so much because, of course, if you're in a bigger city like London, you get paid significantly more than if you're in a town or a smaller city. So some pros. A career as a solicitor can be generally quite lucrative, especially if you're willing to put in the work to get fully qualified and to progress up the ranks. Secondly, the work is very varied. Even within corporate law, there's so many areas you can specialize in, from family to divorce to criminal specialisms. And lastly, the work here can be very fulfilling. There are so many transferable skills you can take from law to many other industries, such as tech, publishing, consulting, literally anything. And now we'll talk about some brief cons. First one is your hours. It's a very well-known fact that trainee solicitors can see themselves spending up to 50 hours, if not more, a week working. And often these hours will be really antisocial hours, so working quite late or working quite early. So if you choose to go down this path, you have to commit to these kind of hours. The second con is partially a byproduct of the first con, but also just a general con, is that it's quite stressful work. Of course, when you're dealing with law and you're dealing with, like, in some cases life and death, in some cases true or false, it can be quite stressful and can be quite taxing emotionally. So once again, if you decide to go down this path, you kind of have to be someone who is okay with that or is able to separate the personal from the work. And the last one, and this one, to be honest, is true for most junior careers, but I feel like it's true for a long part of your law career, is that it's very unlikely you'll choose your clients. And what that means is that there'll be situations where you might have to represent someone or something that you as an individual don't believe in. We've all seen How to Get Away with Murder. There are people out there, and you might be one of those, who can work in this kind of environment, but it's good to ask yourself, can you vouch for someone who doesn't align with your own personal value system? I can't. So now we'll move on to number 5, which is a first-year foundation dentist, usually starting on an average salary of £34,000 per year. One huge pro of dentistry is that it's a very stable career path, with over 90% of grads getting a job within 6 months of graduating. Now that's some stats. The second pro that I think is another great pro about dentistry is that it's a highly respected field. Because it's something that's so essential to society, we need good teeth, dentistry is something that you can talk about and you can be proud of. So some cons about dentistry as a career path is that, one, it's a lot of responsibility. If you think about it, you are in charge of someone's dental health. Whether it be because you're administering local anesthetic or because you're teaching them about oral hygiene, it's a lot of responsibility and you don't want unhappy patients. The second con of dentistry, and honestly it's similar to almost any vocationally leaning professional job, is that you have to think about the time and cost to get into it. So for example, if you're living in the US, the cost of dentistry is going to be eye-watering, especially when you consider you'll be studying for 8 years or more. At number 4, we have junior doctors with an average starting salary of £30,000 to £53,000 per year. So some pros about getting into medicine as a career path, specifically a junior doctor, is that, 1, it's a deeply vocational choice. It's a choice that can be very rewarding if you've gotten into this for personal reasons or reasons that center around the patients themselves. So like dentistry, another pro of being a junior doctor is that it's a well-respected career and thus comes with a lot of job security. One con of choosing to be a junior doctor as your career path, and it's one that I heard recently from a friend in the US, is that it's not as transferable as you think it is. Yes, we need doctors everywhere across the globe, but more often than not, you have to restudy and re-license yourself depending on where you go to. So yeah, the second con I'll mention, it's got a few sub-cons, apologies, but it's that, of course, being a doctor comes with a lot of stress and a lot of unpredictable stress. So a good example is my mum. She works as a nurse, and by default that comes with 12-hour days, which is a lot. And it's something that won't change. Like, as long as she works in hospitals or as long as she works in a setting she's enjoying, it will be 12-hour days. So I think if you want to get into being a doctor, you kind of have to be okay with that, those longer hours. Another source of stress in being a doctor is that, of course, there's a lot of emotional factors that come into play when being a doctor. You have to share bad news as well as good news. You have to share news about terminal illnesses or things that can't be solved. So, if you're someone like me who's you want to fix things and you don't do well not fixing things, it's not really the best industry for myself. But if you're someone who is okay with that and can come to terms with not having a solution for everything, then you might really thrive in being a doctor and having those options and those situations where you can come with a solution, or you can come with a solution that's not the best, but still helps alleviate some pain and alleviate some stress for that person. At number 3, we have my personal favourite, the junior data engineer, with a starting salary of £35,000 per year in the UK. So the first pro, there are actually too many pros to mention in this video, so I'm only going to mention my top 3. So the first pro I'll mention of being a data engineer is that you don't necessarily need a background in STEM. And even more so, you don't necessarily need a degree. There are many people in the industry and field who have gone straight from school or have come from unexpected avenues such as history or law, etc., and gotten into data. The second pro is that data engineering, and honestly data in general, is one of the fastest growing tech areas since 2019. On top of that, the demand is still growing. Data engineering is an essential part of both data science and data strategy. The third pro I'll mention is that data engineering can be incredibly rewarding and self-fulfilling. You have many opportunities to learn a bunch of new skills and apply them in many different use cases, and just really see the impact of your work. So one con that I have to mention about data engineering is that though it's in high demand, it is also highly competitive. You will find yourself up against the masses just for that one job. The second con, which kind of ties into the first one to be honest, is that because data engineering varies so much company to company, there is such a wide playing field of things you can learn and things you could know that will set you aside from someone else. So to truly get to that place where you're really set and certain in your career, you do have to keep learning and you do have to keep growing and you do have to be open to the amount of ways there are of working in data engineering. At number 2, we have a junior consultant with an average starting salary of £37,500. So just to disclaim, when we talk about junior consultants starting at this kind of salary, we're not thinking about people who go as individuals to companies and contract in that method. We're talking more about consultants at the Big Four. One of the big pros about being consulting, and kind of why they grab most of the grads, is that it is a very lucrative career path and a very well-defined career path. From the get-go, you kind of know which direction you're heading in and you have opportunities to work on huge contracts right from the start. On top of this, consulting offers a lot of variety in the work that you'll do and the people that you meet. First con that I'll mention is that consulting is quite a stressful industry because it's so results-driven. This could mean a lot of pressure to deliver results all the time, which often leads to working long hours. The second con I'll mention, which realistically is probably linked to the first one, is that there is a high turnover rate in consulting. What this means is that you'll have to be comfortable with your co-workers changing very often. And at number 1, we have an entry-level project manager with an average starting salary of £45,000 per year. So the first pro I'll mention about being a project manager is that by nature of the role, you will work across different teams. And what that means is that you'll get to see different people of different skill sets and learn how to communicate between these different people. On top of this, if you're a social person, this is a role where it'll be so important to develop new relationships and maintain those relationships. The last pro that I'll mention is, by nature, a project manager manages a project. And what that means is that there'll be many situations where you get to see your plan come to fruition. So some cons that I'll mention about project management, and some cons that I've witnessed myself or experienced myself now that I'm in more of a senior position where by nature I have to project manage, is that you have to manage expectations. That is your job. So you have to be that person who tells stakeholders what is realistic to achieve and what might not be attainable. You might also have to suggest solutions to problems that they might not want and then manage expectations for what they do want. It can be quite difficult because it can be quite emotionally draining to have these kind of conversations, but it is a core part of the role. On top of this, you can't predict how a project will be received once it's delivered. So on top of managing expectations of the client, you also have to manage expectations of yourself and of your team, which can be quite a big burden to carry. So all of this leads to my third con, which is that being a project manager is a very stressful job. Like many of the others before, you will find yourself working antisocial hours and working much longer than you might work in some other industries. So it can be tempting to choose a career path solely based on the amount of money you might make now or in the future, especially in this financial climate. But as you've seen in this video, every single one of these career paths requires a huge upfront time commitment and an ongoing emotional commitment. So it's important to choose a career path that you will truly thrive in and that you will enjoy. Thank you for watching this video on the 6 highest earning career paths. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, and see you next time.